And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome to the marine segment here. Up first, today's sea ice analysis showing conditions kind of fading around St. Lawrence Island and on down the southwest coast. Still holding some ice here, especially up over northern northeast Bristol Bay, but conditions will continue to retreat northward here over the weekend under a continued mild southerly flow. They'll be pushing northward into the northern Bering Sea towards St. Lawrence Island again throughout this weekend. And of course, for Cook Inlet, the sea ice concentrations vary greatly with the tides. And for the tonight's weather, look for an increase in the clouds, threat of some showers there for portions of the southeast coast, mostly along the coastline though. Stays quiet over interior Alaska. Gusty winds and rain for the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea. That whole mess pushes northward, bringing a return to some snow to St. Lawrence Island, probably in the afternoon, and just grazing the southwest coast here, but stays wet and windy for the Alaska Peninsula. Lighter winds, more showery for the Aleutians until you get out toward that main low center west of Shimia. And then even a stronger low moves in south of the western Aleutians. Now push another front with gale and possible storm force winds up into the Aleutians on Sunday. And this front here keeps gales over the central Bering Sea, Pribilof Islands, and back down to the Alaska Peninsula with some rain. And this washing out front here with south to north flow pushes mixed precipitation, warm temperatures up across the Seward Peninsula. Otherwise, pretty nice central and east side of the state, and kind of cloudy here down towards southern Cook Inlet into Fognak Island, Kamishak Bay, and not too bad over the southeast coast. Dry, fair amount of sunshine, light winds. Looks like all the shower activity hopefully will be off the coast. And for the coastal water forecast down there tomorrow, northwesterlies 15 to 20 knots, variable 15 on the central coast to east at 10 to the north 15 for Lynn Canal. 10 knots, 10 knot winds for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait from the north or northwest. And then for Sunday, look for an increase in the winds here. Small craft advisories, Lynn Canal, and for Stevens Passage, northerlies 25 to 30 knots, north 15, Clarence Strait. East-northeast winds 10 to 15 knots on the south coast, east to southeast at 10 on the central coast, and east to northeast at 15 for the north coast. Cook Inlet, northeasterlies tomorrow 10 to 20 knots. Small craft advisory, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, east at 25. Light variable winds here for Prince William Sound, eastern North Gulf Coast. Northeast 15 for western North Gulf Coast. And then for the day Sunday, Cook Inlet, northeast winds 15 to 25 knots. Gale warnings now for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, east at 35 knots. West 25 or east 25 knots for the western North Gulf Coast. Northeast at 10 for Prince William Sound. Out to Kodiak Island, east-southeasterlies tomorrow at 25 to 30 knots, and east-southeast winds at 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. And that same wind pattern all the way up into Bristol Bay. Then for Sunday, gale warnings now for Bristol Bay, east winds 35 knots, Kodiak Island, east winds 30 knots, and east winds 25 to 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, south to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots, south winds 30 knots, so there for Adak and Atka, and gale warnings for the western Aleutians. Then for Sunday, western Aleutians, 45 knot winds out of the east and northeast, and storm warnings here for Adak and Atka over toward Nikolsky for east winds at 50 to 55 knots. Gale warnings for Unalaska Island, southeast winds at 40 knots. And for the southwest coast, gale warnings south of Nunivak Island for east winds 40 knots tomorrow, and that'll blow out right across St. Matthew Island. Otherwise, the Pribilof southeast at 30 knots. Brisk wind advisories east at 25, Yukon Delta Coast, St. Lawrence Island, and Norton Sound. And brisk wind advisories continue here for the southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Southeast at 25 to 30 knots. Gales for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, southeast at 40 knots. East at 30 knots for the Pribilofs and 25 for St. Matthew Island. Chukchi Sea tomorrow, east-northeasterlies 25 knots. East at 20 for the western Arctic coast. 10 knot winds here from the west or southwest for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea. And then for the Sunday outlook, east winds 15 knots here for the central and east coast, and east winds of 20 knots for the western coast. And for the Chukchi Sea, brisk wind advisories all out of the east, running 25 to 30 knots.